Hey, everybody, welcome, and thank you for joining. My name is Zoe Chance. I'm a professor at Yale School of Management and the author of Influence is Your Superpower, coming out on February 1st. One of the most helpful pieces of advice I've gotten, super simple, is this. When you're in a meeting, be one of the first three people to speak.
Ooh, I like that. One of the first three people to speak. So, why is that, Zoe? How has that helped you, and why is that true?
So I got this piece of advice when I'm a junior manager at Mattel, and I have a boss I really don't get along well with at all. But this was very helpful, especially for people who aren't in positions of power in that group. When you feel like you don't belong, and maybe other people feel like you don't belong, it's hard to speak up, and people don't tend to make eye contact with you in that group. So if you haven't spoken up early, you feel like you're just an observer. Nobody's talking with you, and it gets harder and harder and harder the longer you wait. But you can speak up at the beginning of the meeting. It doesn't even have to be when you're having the actual meeting. It can just be small talk beforehand, or you can just ask a question. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be smart. You just have to be early.
Wow, that's great. I wish I'd learned this earlier because I've never been smart, but I'm usually early. So good to know. That's helpful. In all seriousness, though, I accidentally stumbled across that. I didn't know that was good. But I always make small talk at the beginning, like, "Hey, welcome to." Right? I'm a welcomer. I'm a greeter. Right? I don't work at Walmart, but I mean, I'm a greeter. Right? I'm like, "Hey, Zoe, it's good to see you. How are you? What's new?" And I do that a couple times, and then because I try to be on time is late. I was in the military. So that's helped me too. So how did that serve you? How did that influence your thinking?
So, for all of us who have put this into practice, and I teach it to my students, you end up getting to be part of the in group when you don't have a lot of power. So this is including when I'm a PhD student and you're speaking in a room where academia is super hierarchical, and people get to actually listen to you, and they're like, scandalously, one of the outcomes of this is my daughter. And because when I was a PhD student at MIT, and I'm actually speaking up in our lunch group where it's a bunch of PhD students and faculty, and usually it's only faculty who speak up. But me participating and becoming part of the group ended up with me scandalously dating one of the professors. We got married. We had a daughter. Her name is Ripley. She's 13 years old. He's still my colleague here at Yale. He is no longer my husband, but he's a fabulous dad, and we love our kid.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. So you're Dr. Zoe Chance? Is that how this is, right?
Doctor.
drzoe.com? Is that how we do?
Call
No,
me
just
Dr.
kidding.
Chance.
That's it, right? So that's super cool. I did not know that. That's awesome. I did read about Ripley a little bit in the book, which I love, right? Just a little bit, right? So I saw that I think in the acknowledgments, the end notes or something. I saw that.
You
So
saw a
that
picture
was
of her. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So that's super, super cool. So first, I love the book. Super congratulations. This is really wonderful. So cool, cool,
Thank you.
cool. Yeah, you're welcome. And what I also love is I love what you say on the cover of the book. It says, or one of the graphics. It says, influence doesn't flow to those who deserve it. So those people who spoke up early, that would be me, right? I didn't deserve the influence, but to those who understand and practice it. It isn't rocket science, but it is a science. So this isn't just some magic, Zoe, that you're writing about here. I'm not. I didn't see any magic tricks. No cards or anything came with the book.
It
So tell
feels
me
like
about this.
magic, but
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of a lot of people have written a lot of books on influence, and some of them are great. One of them is the reason I got into this field in the first place. Influenced by Bob Cialdini. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And most of these books are people just giving life advice from what they've learned, or researchers focused on transactional influence to get somebody to give you the thing that they want. So they're a means or an obstacle to your goal. And the book that I've written is research based. It's a book that shifts the influence paradigm from how can I get something from somebody to how can I connect with people to become influential in the long run so that they actually want to say yes to me. So, and this is, it's a hopeful vision of influence that basically follows the Spider-Man doctrine. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. Influence as connection. That's the big thing that I got from the book. It's so interesting because it didn't take the path to your point, right? I've read a lot of those influence books too, including Cialdini's book, which is fantastic, by the way. Dr. Cialdini is brilliant and influenced a lot of my thinking too. But what I think is interesting is we're not talking about the Kardashians here, right? We're talking about getting people to like us in the long run, not to buy our mascara, but to actually want to work with us and stay connected to us. And I think that's so interesting. And so, how did you decide that this book even needed to be written, Zoe?
I've been teaching this class called Mastering Influence and Persuasion at Yale School of Management for the past decade. It's the most popular elective at the business school. And the real reason that I've written this book is because you should not have to go to Yale to have the tools of what it takes to become influential in this way. And to give an illustrative example of what do I mean to shift from a transaction to something like a relationship, I'll just share briefly a situation that happened in a company that I interned in as an MBA student, which is it's called Guidant Medical Device Company, and they have the problem that demand is vastly outstripping supply for their new stent system. So the leader, Ginger Graham, has to come to the employees and get them get them to work overtime for a couple of months between, including Thanksgiving and Christmas, when nobody wants to do that. In a transaction, she might use a carrot or a stick and say, either you got to do this or you're fired, or here, I'm going to shove a pile of money at you so that you'll do this. Even in that situation, the employees can feel like you can feel like a slave when somebody's given you an incentive that you've responded to. To connect with people instead, she asks them the question, okay, besides money, what will it take for you to be happy to come in and do this and put in the overtime that it's going to take? What she found totally surprised her. They said, so we're hungry and we like pizza. Maybe that's not a surprise. They said, we take the bus and it doesn't run at night. So you need to give us money for cab fare. And one of the things that stresses us out a lot over the holidays is Christmas present wrapping. So you need to hire a Christmas present wrapper for us so we can bring our gifts in. So they did. They ramped up production to record levels. Everybody got a bonus, which I think was 30%. And the most important thing that happened is she has highly engaged employees at the end of this so that they're not going to be among the like many, many people we have now who are quitting their jobs, reconsidering what do I want to do with my life. You have people who want to stay and be loyal to you as a leader who's really listened to them.
Wow. Yeah, asking and then actually delivering on a reward is so darn powerful. I mean, it's so interesting, right? Cab fare. Okay, you were probably going to give them money anyway, so now we got cab fare. Okay, cross that off the list. But gift wrapping. That's so interesting, right? I mean, that's probably somebody who loves to wrap gifts, probably $10, $15 an hour, that you just drop your gifts off, you have them wrapped, and voila, they're done. I mean, I do that at the mall when we had these things, right? So I think that's so fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
And
Zoe,
you
that's
could
great.
never know unless you ask, right? And the asking what would it take is such a powerful question that you and I have talked about a little bit. And part of the reason it's powerful is you find answers that you never would have expected, and often it's so much less than you would have been willing to do. Like just
Yeah.
like you said, whatever it costs to hire the present wrapper is tiny compared to the amount of good juju that comes out of it, and having people feel that you listened to them and you cared about their problems.
Yeah, so true and so infrequently, sadly, done. And one of the things, though, that I think about that as we think about that is asking for more will make people like you less, is one of the myths that you bust in the book. And I think that's so interesting because, I know that I'm often reticent to ask for help, like at
Really?
all. Yeah, for
Really?
sure. Yeah,
Really?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm
What
good at helping. I just don't always ask because I'm like, yeah, well, they don't want to help, or they're busy, or I mean, I'm really good at
you know,
making excuses, Zoe.
Phil, even though I know that pretty much everyone I've talked to, regardless of their job, whether they're a CEO or a central banker or even a princess, is reluctant to ask. It's so funny because you strike me as someone who's just so out there and confident with people that I would have put you on the far end of the spectrum of being more comfortable asking. Can I ask you, what's
Yeah.
a situation in which you're not comfortable asking?
Oh boy. So, so I'll tell you a lot of them. For a long time, it was dating. I sucked at
Mm.
that, and I will also say I'm really bad unless I have something in common of even asking to have a part of a conversation. So I'm great at networking in more than two people, and I'm really great. Like if I know, like right here, right, like you and I could talk all day about influence and about the book and stuff, like we did, in our pre call for sure. But if I were to have to walk up to you at a bar, there would be not a chance that I would ever do that. Like, I am the shyest person, and I won't ask at all. And I will tell you, I don't ask for help from my friends when I struggle. I'm getting better at that, though. I promise. I am, because I've worked at it. I'm aware of it. So I know that I need to get better at that. But it's been super hard.
I'm so glad you brought up the dating thing because this is one of the domains. Love and money are the two domains that almost all of us have trouble asking in at least one, if not both of those. But love isn't something that we typically talk about in, say, a conversation like this, and it's happening on LinkedIn where we talk about business. And and one of the things that makes it hard for people to be asking for things in the domain of love is that we think that we're not supposed to let other people know what we want because there's this myth of true love that it just falls down from the sky. And if you're a woman, like me and my girlfriends, we've been trained to believe that not only do you not have to ask, but Disney Princess says all you have to do is fall asleep. And then Prince Charming rides in on his white horse, he kisses you, and you live happily ever after. So I've talked with so many people who not only are uncomfortable to ask in the domain of love, but they feel like they shouldn't have to, that it somehow ruins the magic if you were to actively go out and seek that kind of connection.
That's interesting, and to your point, I've read that, I've seen that, right? I've watched a lot of those movies. I watch them, with my little guy now. We watch Princess or even the Prince movies. I mean, a lot of times they're either one that we have that right. The you don't deserve power or money or love or whatever it is you secretly wish for is a big thing that people need to kind of get over. And to that, I mean, I grew up really poor, so I kind of heard that, right? Like, don't ask. My stepdad was really big on, I will give you what I think you deserve when I'm ready to give it to you. That
Mm.
was the big lesson that I had as a kid. So I'm still
You
working
know,
through that. And this is not meant to be a therapy session, but, it's interesting, right? That's rooted in that. And that's the first I've thought of it, to be quite honest with you, Zoe. That's the first I've realized that, like, that's probably where I'm at with that.
I love that we're going to this deep place right away in this conversation. It's not a coincidence that you grew up without a lot of money and you got trained by your parents to not ask and to work, excuse me, to work hard to be deserving so you would receive. There's a study by Jessica Calarco, who's a sociologist, that I describe in this book, where she goes to a school and she's observing middle school students to count the number of students who ask for help on homework, for extensions to turn it in, to get out of punishments, to do things that are more fun, like creatively, can I do this thing instead of exceptions? What she found is that students from middle class, instead of working class families, were 7 times more likely to ask for help than students from working class families. She then interviews the parents. Oh, by the way, very importantly, teachers were just as likely to say yes to kids no matter what their socioeconomic background was. And teachers just try to say yes to everyone in general, right? They love the kids and they don't want to be hassled, so they try to say yes. What she found was that parents from working class backgrounds were teaching their kids that they had to be deserving. They were teaching them to be self-reliant, and parents from middle class backgrounds were more likely, 7 times more likely, to be teaching their kids that privileges are negotiable and negotiated. So you're not alone.
Interesting.
You're in the
Wow.
majority of people.
Wow, that's
And
interesting.
can I just offer one thing on
Yeah.
so I am not Dr. Ruth or Dr. Drew. I guess Dr. Drew doesn't offer love advice. I'm not Dan Savage. I'm not offering love advice. However, there's one tiny thing that can make it more comfortable for us to be asking in those kind of romantic situations, which is to do something that I call a soft ask. And it's to ask a hypothetical question instead of a direct request where you can be immediately rejected. And a hypothetical question would be something like, if the direct question is, would you like to have dinner with me? The hypothetical version is, how would you feel about going out to dinner together? That question sounds like the same thing, but it's so much more comfortable on the other side to have that person be able to say no, and having them in any context. I'm not saying that everyone's going to instantly get a date from this, but in any context, when you make it more comfortable for another person to say no, you actually help them feel more inclined to say yes. So, whatever your chances were of getting a yes, you've increased by asking it in this way. And then you have decreased your your chance of feeling deep shame if the answer is no, because you didn't get rejected. They just told you how they feel. So if they said, like, yeah, thank you for asking, but I'm not really comfortable with that. Like, it's totally okay compared to, would you go out to dinner with me? No,
No.
thank you. Right. So it's
Wow.
it's better on both sides if we go for a soft ask in these
Wow.
contexts.
That's so interesting. So Bob Berg talked about that in Winning Without Intimidation. He talked about how you give people an out and they're less likely to take it, like
Yeah,
counterintuitively. They're less likely to take it if you give them an out. And now you're telling me scientifically that's backed up? That's awesome.
it's awesome.
That is so cool. That's awesome. So what is in the book? Let's go a little bit through the book here. You talked about the magic question. Is that the magic question, Zoe, or what is the magic question?
The magic question is the question that came up in this example of the medical device company and Christmas present wrappers. It is just, what would it take? And can I share a little story about this to help it sink into people's
Yeah.
minds? That so you can visually imagine this. This is a story Gloria Steinem shared when she came to my hometown of New Haven a few years ago. She was working on the problem of sex trafficking. She was an expert. She was speaking and writing on this topic, and she had just been to a conference in Zambia when she goes to a village after this conference that's in the middle of nowhere near a game preserve. And three young women had been lost the previous year to sex traffickers, not heard from again. She sits down in the middle of a barren field with a group of women on a tarp, and she asks the magic question instead of giving them advice or telling them what to do. She asks, what would it take for this to never happen again so that no women from this village are sex trafficked? They told her, an electric fence. An electric fence? They said, when the corn reaches a certain height, the elephants come, they eat it, they trample the crops. We have nothing to eat. We have no money to send our kids to school, nothing to sell at the market. And these young women and their families were desperate. So Gloria Steinem says, if I raise the money for a fence, will you clear the field and will you build it? They said yes. She goes home to the US, raises a few $1,000s, which is all that it takes, sends it to them. And the way she wraps up the story, she said she goes back a few years later and there is a bumper crop of corn, and no women have been sex trafficked from this village since they got the fence. So the magic question, what would it take? And it works in a bunch of different ways that I can explain if you want. But
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so give us another way,
so
Zoe.
sure. So we've talked about how you get answers you wouldn't have expected, like Christmas present wrappers, like an electric fence, because she had no idea that it's not just a sex trafficking problem or even a poverty problem. It's a human wildlife conflict problem that's much more easily solvable than she would expect. A key thing here is that it's respectful. And when you ask this question, you're shifting from the context of persuasion, which people can be very resistant to collaborative problem solving, which is very enjoyable. And they will give you this roadmap. They're committing to the outcome if that roadmap gets followed. So let's say that you're asking your boss, what would it take for me to get to the top of the salary band? Or what would it take for me to get to the next level in my career? They'll be excited to tell you because they want you to do a great job. And then when that's happened and you show them, hey, here's what I did, they will help you get that raise or they will help you get that promotion if they can. There's also the like, is it helpful? Is it not helpful? It's good to know that if you're asking them, what would it take? And the answer is nothing. You got that helpful information. But what I really love about this question is that you can ask it of anybody, anytime, in any situation. Like, instead of giving somebody critical feedback that's going to be hard for them to hear, you can ask, what would it take to improve this behavior or have a positive outcome so you can work in a healthy way together and they will actually like you instead of hating you for telling them how bad they are.
Wow. So how young does this work? I've got a 6-year-old. Do you think I can make this work with him, Zoe?
Phil, absolutely. When I teach leadership to CEOs, I teach the magic question. And honestly, the most common feedback that I get afterward is, oh my God, I use this on my child. So I have influence at work and it kind of works because I'm the boss and I get to tell people what to do. In my house, I'm not the boss. My kids are the hardest. So yeah, what is it that you'd like to influence your 6-year-old to do, Phil?
Oh my gosh, so much, so much. So yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, right? But asking what would it take, right, is so interesting because one of the things that I want him to do is rinse the sink out after he brushes his teeth. Seems really simple, right? So we do talk about that. I don't use those words, and some days, like, and the other problem is he's the opposite of an elephant. He always forgets. So I'm trying to positively reinforce without like sticking his face in the sink and being like, you will wash this. I mean, obviously I'm not doing that, right? So don't call CPS on me. But yeah, I mean, I that is absolutely something that I want to do. And it's interesting because the 15-year-old she phrases like she's pretty good at that. I mean, she doesn't ask those exact words. She doesn't say what would it take, but she does kind of get at that as I'm thinking through, right? As you're talking, I'm like, does Georgia do that? Yeah, she sure does. So that's pretty cool. But you talk about in the book, though, interestingly, though, that negotiating while female is a challenge here. So let's talk about that because I've got a 15-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Little guy's probably going to be okay, with that. I mean, he'll learn to rinse the sink out. But the 15-year-old, I want her to get, I want her to get ahead too. I don't want her to be, trapped like, unfortunately, like a lot of folks are. So tell me about the
Yeah.
science behind that, maybe some stats or some story, and then how do we help her get stronger?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the rinsing the sink out is not a big deal. It's going to happen. But I do have something to share about that that's different from the magic question, if you want, that we can
Yeah, please
get
do.
back to. But women and negotiating is such a hot, juicy, fraught topic, and it's especially poignant right now where we're in the middle of this quote unquote great resignation. We have so many people leaving their jobs or wanting to leave their jobs. 70% of women in recent surveys have said that they are willing to leave their jobs for more money. And this is, as far as I understand, a record high. Women don't like to negotiate. In my surveys, about 40% of men say that they like or love negotiating, and only 17% of women say they like or love negotiating. And we are more willing to leave to get more money than we are to ask for more money. And it of course, that has tremendous costs, not just for
Wow.
the people leaving, but for the companies that they leave. And a lot of women are familiar with this research that women end up facing backlash more often than men do for asking, but they make the wrong inference from it, which is that we shouldn't ask, or they read that women do better negotiating on behalf of others, and they think that, okay, we shouldn't negotiate on our own behalf. We should just be asking for others. But their misunderstanding is about how we ask versus what we ask for. And there's this key dimension that everyone is judged on, but women are judged more harshly than men, which is the first reaction of every person to every other person is unconsciously or consciously, do I like them? And uh, the biggest factor that determines that is, are they warm? And the second one is do they respect me? But if a woman comes across as not being warm, then it's very common that they get called all kinds of B words that are gender specific. Like if you think about it, boys don't get called bossy, right? That is just a girl thing. Um, so it's more important for women to come across as warm. We absolutely have to be asked, all of us though, and men, it's very helpful for men to come across as warm. And you totally nailed that, Phil, and I really appreciate it. And this is why people like to listen to you, right? Like your warmth is really a big factor in that. It's just that if I were not also warm, people would hate me, and if you were not warm, people might still listen to you. Um, I just lost my train of thought. I have so
No,
many things
so
to say
no,
about
no,
women and
that's interesting.
negotiating.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So the warmth factor, that's kind of contrary to at least some of the stuff I've heard. Right, is that women have to be serious. Right, it's important that they're serious, that they're not funny. That I can tell you
Oh my
one of
God,
my
who's
boss.
giving this
Yeah.
advice?
No, so I'm just telling you, I had a boss who was, amazing, amazing person that she felt like she had to be emotionless, she had to be strong, and I'm putting that in air quotes here, and super professional. And, to your point, right, I was like, what's the deal? Like, why would you not? And I mean, and honestly,
And
that's how I got learned so much warmth is because I had to be, if she was the ice queen, I had to be the warm, I had to be Captain Sunshine. And so it's so interesting though, because I'm sure she felt like, hey, I should do this because this is the way people expect, or this is what she learned, right? And to your point, I mean, I can tell you, I totally respect people that are warm, male or female, more than people who put up that raw front.
there, you may be familiar, Phil, with this book that comes to mind by Marshall Goldsmith that's called "What Got You Here Won't Get
Yep.
You There,"
Yep.
and so many of us as leaders, when we've gotten to be successful in whatever field we're in, we look at our behavior and say, well, that's what it took, right? So your boss
Hmm.
was a successful ice queen. It's not that you can't be successful as an ice queen, it's just a steeper path. And she can say to herself, well, this is what it took. I'm an ice queen. I needed to be an ice queen. And that book, it's great, opens up the question of, well, first of all, is the same thing that you've been doing what it's going to take to get to the next level, which is often no. And it also opens up the question, is that a strength or is it a liability that you succeeded in spite of?
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting.
Should we go back to the question about changing the behavior with the and
Yeah,
just
let's change the
using
6-year old behavior. Hit me.
so the we know this particular behavior change is going to shift, but it illustrates this key distinction between influencing influencing someone by trying to change their mind or influencing someone by trying to shift their behavior. And we mix these two things up a lot and we imagine that we have to change someone's mind in order to change their behavior. But often, if what you want is to change someone's behavior, maybe there's an intervention that just goes directly there. So, in the case of rinsing out the sink, he doesn't remember. And not remembering is one of the biggest reasons that we don't do the things we intend to do, including in domains of life and death, like medication adherence. 50% of people who actually can pay for and have gone to the pharmacy to get the prescription they've been prescribed don't take it the way that it's been prescribed. And the biggest reason is that we don't remember. And this not remembering is losing hundreds of thousands of lives in the United States every year, and certainly millions of lives around the world. So, what could you do to help your son remember so that he doesn't have to keep it in his mind that this is the thing that he has to do?
Well, I could
And
put a
maybe you
sign
could
on the
ask
mirror.
him,
Yeah.
what would it take?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're,
No, but
they
I
they
could put a sign by the mirror, right? I could gently remind him. I mean, so that's you say that though, real quick. I always thought like if he wanted to do it, he would remember. So therefore he doesn't want to do it, so he doesn't do it, right? So but that's so interesting. So yeah, so signs up, and I've seen that, right? I mean, I see that in bathrooms, like wash your hands for 20 seconds. Like we all know that. That's not memorable, but wash your hands to sing happy birthday, that's more memorable. And that's wow, that's crazy, Zoe.
Yeah, and if you ask him, he may have something that he'll tell you would remind him. Like he's got a little Hot Wheels car that if you put it by the sink, he's going to know what the Hot Wheels car means is rinse after you do the toothbrush. For people
Wow.
with medication adherence, when they put a bottle of medicine next to their toothbrush for medicines that you take once or twice a day, it's just a visual cue that reminds you, oh, yeah, that's right. I didn't have to remember to take my medicine. I just see it when I grab my toothbrush. Uh,
Wow.
and about remembering if you want to remember, I had an experience last year that I felt terrible about where I brought my cat on a plane and I didn't remember to take him out of the bag before it goes through the x-ray machine at TSA. And I love this cat so much that I took him on vacation with me. That is a lot. And yet I'm just going through my habitual behavior where I travel a lot, never with a cat. I take up my shoes, take up my laptop, but it's just I'm on autopilot. So I didn't remember the cat. And researchers who study unconscious behavior estimate that about 95% of all of our behavior is driven unconsciously by habits and by gut reactions, emotions, the decisions that we're not making consciously. So that's a huge sea change shift that we have to make as people who are trying to influence others' behavior.
All right. I'll remind him a couple more times, Zoe. That's helpful. And I'll ask him the magic question. So that's good, right? What would it take to get you to do that? So that's good. I'm serious. I will try that. I think that's very, very helpful. And I really appreciate that insight there. And I'll try that because the 15-year-old is going to be driving soon. So I'm going to ask her what's it going to take for her to drive safely and not get in accidents. So I think it's a governor on the engine that only goes 15 miles an hour. So we're going to get her a golf cart. That's really the key there. So yeah, that's
Good
awesome.
luck with that, Philip.
Yeah, right? Yeah, for sure. So just a couple more points here, Zoe, before we wrap up. So one of the things in the book that I really love is you talk about the fact that ultimatums suck and they don't work.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about ultimatums and why they don't work and what we can do to be better.
So people think that ultimatums work because you've had some experience where you gave an ultimatum and that person then complied with your ultimatum. But ultimatums are one of the worst influence and negotiation strategies because you're not thinking of how many times you gave an ultimatum and you actually destroyed any possibility of success and it came to a standstill, or the maybe the other person walked away. If you give someone an ultimatum in an ultimatumy kind of way, they will be ashamed if they have to comply with you. So you're giving them a lose-lose situation. And you are also putting yourself in the terrible situation where you have to follow through. Like if let's say that you get to the point where you're thinking of quitting your job and you say, I'm going to leave if you don't let me work from home, right? Which many of us are feeling like that right now. If that is not 100 million% true, and they're not going to let you work from home because they can't, but you've said, I'm quitting unless you let me work from home, you're going to have to leave. You feel that you will have to leave. What you could say instead in an ultimatumy situation is what I call a face-saving plan B, which is let them know that you have some outside option that you're considering, but it's not an ultimatum. You're just letting them know you have some leverage. So you could say, for example, listen, I want to work from home so badly that I'm finding myself being open to other possibilities. I'm getting some inquiries about possibilities for virtual work. If you could help me work from home in this job, I will absolutely stay. I will be so excited. I love working here. I love working for you. What would it take to make that happen?
Wow. Snap him in the face with that magic question, Zoe. That's awesome.
I have
That's
to
a
give it a snap him in the face.
Yeah, but you kind of do, right? I mean, when you think about it, when it comes back around, like if there's one thing that I've taken away from the book and our conversation today is the whole what will it take? And I really like that. I think that's super helpful. I've got a lot of folks that I'm going to work to be more influential with. Which is great. And I love the book. Like I told you, right? Influence is Your Superpower, folks, is the book. And you should absolutely pick up a copy and go to zoechance.com for way more insights on influence. But Zoe, if there's one way that folks can get started today and be more influential, maybe by the afternoon, maybe it's the magic question, maybe it's something else. But what would that one way be if you're going to share one thing?
I would say absolutely start there. The magic question, what would it take, is a great place to start. And it's the favorite influence technique of a lot of people out of the many that I teach. And I invite you, please, if you put this into action, let me know how it goes. I'd love if you want to connect with me here on LinkedIn. You can come to my website. I have a newsletter and other ways to reach out to me. But ask the magic question. And I'll ask you, what would it take for you, everyone who's joined us on the call, to put this into action? Thank you for being here today.
You are awesome, Zoe. Thanks so much. And folks, put it into action, right? What's it going to take for you to get a copy of Influence is Your Superpower? We learned lots of great stuff today. That magic question is great. We talked about influence's connection. We talked about how ultimatums are the worst negotiating strategies. And it gets back to that magic question. So Zoe, I so appreciate you. This was so much fun. I learned a lot, and congratulations on your book. So
Thank
happy
you,
for
Phil. You're such a joy to talk with. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. See you, everyone. Thanks so much for listening, for watching. Now go get a copy of the book. What's it going to take for you to realize that influence is your superpower?